Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Odette Klevit here with the System Simplified podcast, where we interview top entrepreneurs, founders, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this podcast is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group. At Business Success Consulting Group, we create custom processes and tailor-made business systems so businesses can thrive and grow. And today's guest is Odette D'Aniello. Hi, Odette.
Hi, Addie.
It's so awesome to have you. And for those listeners that are viewing the podcast, they can see your background, which is gorgeous. And it's so exciting what you do. You create custom cakes, like artistic cakes, which is so incredible. You're basically combining the aesthetic of taste and beauty, and you make it basically into a piece of art. So, the name of your company is Celebrity Cake Studio, and
Correct.
You also have Dragonfly Cakes.
Right.
And definitely, I would encourage our listeners to go to your website and check it out because the cakes are just gorgeous. Do people just want to look at a cake and not eat it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to eat something that is a work of art. It's hard for me to eat my own cake sometimes because they're so beautiful. And usually we wait to the very, very last minute until we slice the cake. And that can be a problem, right? Because then, now you have a full cake and nobody wants to bite into it.
I know that's really a problem. But anyway, I just thought about it because I go like, this is so beautiful. It's like a sculpture. Why do I want to eat it? But that is part of it, which is amazing. So tell me and the listeners a little bit about your story. I know you have a very unique story, how you got started and how this business came about. And now you're into your 20-something year into the business. It's a business that you have with your sisters. So it's a family business. So it's a creative business, a family business, a business that you started. You're going to tell us the story. So go ahead and tell us how did it all start?
So my story started in the Philippines. My great granduncle, my great granduncle, my granduncle apprenticed for a baker. And when World War II hit, there was basically food was lacking in the Philippines because the Japanese had just invaded and the Americans had swooped in to save the day. And there were some rations. So he took the US rations of salt and flour and yeast and created an oven out of some metal gas containers and created an oven out of it, used the skills that he learned as an apprentice of the baker and started making bread. And that's how he created the first bakery. And it was called Tinong's Bakery in Cebu, Philippines. My mother worked for him and he had financed her schooling, took her out of the farming fields, the rice fields. And she became a worker for her uncle. And that's how she learned her skill. And she ended up running that business. And I grew up in a bakery in Cebu. There was like 100 workers downstairs. My brother and I, and my parents lived upstairs. My mom managed this bakery. And I grew up with all kinds of mixers and ovens and bread thrown everywhere and yeast, the smell of yeast in the morning and fresh baked bread and trucks moving bread back and forth. And that was my formative years of growing up in a bakery compound in Cebu. When I was 10, I moved to Guam, where my uncle had opened up a bakery called Elite Bakery on Guam. And my parents worked for them. And because we had transferred as a family, my brother was 11, I was 10, became part of the working crew. And I sliced bread and then learned how to decorate cakes when I was 10 because the decorating room was air conditioned. So I taught myself how to decorate cakes. That was the most fun part about the bakery business. Everything else I didn't like. I ended up going to college in Arizona, University of Arizona, where my daughter is now, ironically. And after college, went back to Guam to teach. And, I wanted to move to the States and have a farm. I mean, that was my dream, to just have a farm. But that whole dream didn't work out. And so I had this idea of opening up a bakery. I was 28 years old, and I convinced my parents to loan me $30,000 as, to help us open up a bakery. And it started in 1999. We opened our doors as a bakery cafe. And then that has been the birth of our business, really. I mean, it's my sister and I own our business ourselves now, and we've never took on any kind of investment or anything like that. It's always been just like us, just nuts and bolts, learning as we went, because I did not have a master's degree or an MBA, and I didn't know business. I knew education, but that's how we started, and we kind of just learned on the go. Like, I read a lot of books. I read Seth Godin's books on Bootstrapper's Bible. And I got out of a very dicey situation when we nearly went bankrupt. And then I converted our business from a cafe to a cake studio. And that was like in the year 2000. So we've been in this business since then.
Oh, wow. That's a great story. And you started it all with your sister. So from the beginning, you were working with your sisters.
Well, my sister's 10 years younger than me. So she came to Washington from Guam with plans of going to college. And my initial partner was my older brother, who was 11 months older than me. And he's a baker, and he knows how to build bakeries. Like, he knows how to install everything. He knows all the ins and outs of building bakeries, because that's what he had learned working for my uncle and opening up, businesses for my parents when he was in his 20s. So when we opened up our own little thing, he was my partner, and it was me, my husband David, and my brother. And then my brother left the business, and we became estranged. And he gave his shares to my sister. And so she quit college and then became my partner. And we have been partners for 23 years.
Wow.
Yes. And we're still like the best of friends. Like, I just talk to her. Like, I talk to her every day. So it's been amazing journey to have that.
Absolutely. So it seems like you had to pivot there in order to avoid a disaster.
Oh, yeah. Always pivoting, always.
always changing, always looking, but look at what you created now. So what gave you the idea to actually go into more of a boutique? You're basically like a boutique bakery for beautiful cakes.
Yeah, it was very interesting, actually. The universe has a way of like giving you the way out of things when you ask for it. Because I had this idea of having a cafe where you have unlimited fillings of sandwiches and all that for $5. So our cafe had a line out the door every lunchtime, and we were like the talk of the town. Everybody loved us. We were written up in the paper and all, but we were losing money left and right. And I realized it's like, this isn't going to work. Like, we're going to lose everything, and I had just bought like a little house, and I had a mortgage that I was paying with my credit card. It was hard. So I ended up like, I literally closed my eyes and I'm like, God, please help me, just like, in whatever way or form. Like, I meditated a lot. I've had a meditation practice since in my early 20s. So in my meditation, I would ask for guidance, and I ended up driving on I-5, and there was this wedding show, and I just took a detour, and I entered this wedding show, and I didn't know what that was. I just moved from Guam. There's nothing like that on Guam. Walked in, and I met these people who just did wedding cakes, and I was like, I can do that. Like, I'm really good at that. So I talked to the owner of the show. I'm like, I'm an amazing cake decorator. And, he's like, you are? I'm like, yeah, I can do this with my eyes closed. I've done it since I was 10. And he goes, well, do my show. And I started like literally like pouring my heart out about the hardship that we were having and losing all this money. And the guy's like, do my show and you'll never have to worry about selling a $2 croissant again. Actually, a 50-cent croissant again. So I charged the $800 on my credit card. His name was John Buckles was his name. And so a few months later, I went to the show and I made up all kinds of like fake cakes. I just basically copied the people who were there. And I was like, okay, how are they doing this? And I basically copied what they were doing. And I made up like the little brochure. I just like made up all kinds of stuff. And then I did the show. And ironically, I also got pregnant with my first kid. So I was pregnant. I was doing the show, trying to run a business. And then the show was amazing. People were like, oh my God, we love your stuff. And then they came over. So then I was like, I think this is going to work because it's going to take like 10 sandwiches to sell, to one cake. And I was just thinking about like, if we had, if we sold $100 worth of cake, that's 20 sandwiches we don't have to make. And so I kind of calculated it. Like, that's how I made the decision. And then one day we were like, we're shutting down the cafe. We're going to be a cake studio. And one day we were a cafe. The next day we were a cake studio. And people would come in for lunch and we're like, we're a cake studio now. And there people are like, wait, what happened to lunch? No longer serving lunch. We're now a cake studio.
Amazing.
And people were like, wait, what dimension did I enter? It was really
so then obviously you build a clientele and you got known and you got a reputation and you start hiring staff, etc. And now we come to Dragonfly Cakes. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So we actually, first we started, we had that little cafe and then we bought our competitor who was specializing in cake and we moved to a bigger city and Tacoma. And that was in 2004. I just had my son. And then, so I learned how to acquire a business from that experience. And then in 2016, we needed to pivot again, for many reasons. And I bought 2 businesses that year. And one of them was Dragonfly Cakes. And that business was out of Sausalito, California. And they were manufacturing tea cakes that they distributed. Their bigger customers were like online mail order, like Williams Sonoma and all, those kinds of high-end customers. So we took that on. We put it, we learned how to manufacture their products because we moved all the machines to our facility here in Tacoma. And then we just grew it from there. So that's how, we kind of pivoted from like a little thing. And then we just kind of, I acquired a business and learned how to do that. I just kind of learned on the go. And I just asked a lot of questions and asked for a lot of advice. I do. I just ask for a lot of like perspective and advice and all that. So that's how Dragonfly Cakes came along. And now we're in about 6 regions around the country. I don't know exactly how many stores. I believe we're like in 600 to 800 stores. I'm not sure, but it seems like everywhere I travel, our products are there.
That's amazing. Absolutely incredible story. And this podcast is all about systems, right? And I interview people and entrepreneurs, thought leaders, founders about how to use systems in order to grow the business, in order to expand in any area of life, right? So I know that you implement EOS, the entrepreneurial organizational system, and part of it is processes. So I know you're big on processes. We talked about that.
Right.
So tell me from your perspective, from the entire journey that you had with acquiring businesses, growing your own business, etc., why processes are so important for a business?
Well, we came from a very like gritty, small town, perspective of just like throwing things on the walls and see what sticks and like always solving things as they go. And it was very reactive. And so we were problem solvers and we just like, if there's a problem, we'll solve it, but then we realized like, if you're a problem solver, problems are going to find you, but you can also change that whole narrative and mitigate the issue before it happens. And systems do that. So I looked at EOS, which is the Entrepreneur Operating System, based on a book called Traction, and years ago, but I couldn't afford it. It was, it was definitely not within our reach financially at that time. But we've just, we instituted EOS maybe over a year or more than a year ago. Before that, we had hired a really amazing consultant who helped us do lean. He was our lean consultant. So we did a lot of lean, like leaning out our organization and making sure that we're maximizing efficiencies. And from that, from learning all about that and kind of always making the choice to be a lean organization, just kind of, it made sense to have a system of implementation. So EOS does that for us. And it's been an amazing journey just because, weekly we have our L10 meetings, on a leadership level, and then the management has theirs, and then, and below that also. So people know and we're aligned with what we're doing. So I don't necessarily have to just cheerlead, CEOs normally like cheerleads and problem solves, and we've just mitigated problems. Things don't come up to me unless they're severe. Like, I only have one person answer to me, and that's my sister, who's our integrator, our CEO. She does the day-to-day management. So I don't have to problem solve, and it gives me time to do what I do best, which is visioning and strategy.
Excellent. So basically what you're saying is having systems allows you to actually wear your hat as a visionary and vision and strategy. And then the operation just works because people know what they're doing, because there is enough consistency, efficiency, etc.
Yes. And it's not confusing to people, right? So I'm not walking in. The issue with me is that I have a very different management style than my sister. So I would go in and I'm like literally squirrel every minute, right? Like, oh, I have this idea and this idea and that idea. Like I just kind of throw wrenches on everything because that's just my personality. And I always felt bad about that because the impact on the team was negative, but I never saw the impact because I'm just like careening down this path, like 5 years down the road kind of vision. But, my staff is facing the day-to-day issues, and I never would realize that. And they wouldn't tell me it because, that nobody wants to tell Odette that, you're being annoying, right? Because it's really, I was just an annoying person to deal with because I'm not in line with what was going on from day to day. I'm not grounded. So with EOS, we've been able to just have this like, okay, unless you're in Odette's like team, which I have a certain seat I'm sitting in, apart from being a CEO, then, I stay out of the conversation unless it's like severe. It's like, unless it's a leadership issue.
Great. Yeah. So you just like keep to your lane and everyone keeps to their lane. I mean, obviously they coordinate and then you have that result, so, you mentioned in terms of like that will annoy you or they will come to you with questions that do not belong to you, etc. So how do you, as a visionary, as the CEO of the company, how do you actually come across as yourself, right? In terms of like, what is your way of instilling what's important, the values, the culture into the organization from the visionary standpoint?
Well, for me, it's been a journey of like really showing up authentically. I know the word authenticity is so overused in so many ways, but it's been a journey for me to really be myself because I've noticed I compartmentalize and I think a lot of women do, maybe men too, but obviously I'm not a man, so I don't know their direct experience, but as a woman, first generation, it's like we tend to be pleasers and we tend to want to get along and not necessarily have hard conversations. But for me, I come off as very, very open-hearted. And I just, I see my organization as a way for people to flourish. And the conversations that I have with every single person who I interact with in my organization or representing my organization or just me with any other person, I just come off with an open heart, and that is my intention. So if I have that conversation, or if I have that interaction where I'm open hearted, then I'm being authentic. But then if I'm not that, then I need to backtrack that and really rethink what my intentions were and be true, right? So how I show up, I'm very, very conscious of the impact that I have on other people, because I certainly, in 23 years, I've railroaded a lot of conversations, or hurt a lot of people in what I've said or done, and maybe not meant it, but for the sake of getting things done, or getting the deal done, or negotiating this or that, I don't think I was as conscious as I am now, just because I've been really focused on it. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does. It does. We talked about it also before the show in terms of coming off authentic, and you have your hat as a visionary, right? And as the CEO, and sometimes it's hard to define how you're actually going to create the culture that you want, right? So I was just curious in terms of like how do you overcome that obstacle, and how does it apply to your company?
Well, we do have like a list, we have our mission, our vision, and we base a lot of our conversations on that. And then we, it's like if somebody's behavior is not in alignment with that, there's definitely, we don't tolerate backstabbing. We don't tolerate triangulation. We don't tolerate any of that, that diminishes people. So that conversation happens fairly quickly, because we just don't tolerate it. We have no patience for it. So then you have a safe culture, right? You have a safe place to work where you can say what you need to say, and that you could, express any concerns or any, you could raise your hand and say, I'm not comfortable with this decision. And I'm very, very, very open to being corrected. So I'm open to being corrected, because I'm not perfect. And hopefully that's how we keep in alignment. We have very clear mission, and we have very clear values as an organization.
That's fantastic. So from you're the visionary. You're also very creative. I mean, the beautiful work that you do, right? I mean, you're what?
I did this cake.
Amazing. That's amazing. And for our listeners, we have a background of this beautiful way. It's a wedding cake, right? It's like this gorgeous wedding cake with these gorgeous flowers, and Odette made it herself, which is unbelievable. So there is a lot of creativity in you, and and I've seen you. You like to, it's the fun, it's the creativeness, right? It's the people, like you said, it was the people pleaser, but it's also like it's very kind and friendly. How do you reconcile between that and having systems, or let's say that you need to have systems in a business in order to grow, right? I mean, we talked about having the process part, etc. And what I find is that sometimes for people that are so creative, they go, well, systems, like I don't want to deal with it. Let's not deal with that. Let's go with our creativity. Let's go with change. Let's just go with whatever comes our way that day, right? So how do you reconcile between that and that you need systems in order to run the business?
First of all, I'm surrounded with people who say no to me that I think that they think my ideas are nutty. Like I have people who surround me that just like keep me on my lane. Like, yeah, no, let's not do that. That's not good. And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. Like, so I have a lot of people who keep me in check. And I really am open to people who disagree with me. I kind of surround myself with people who think like, no, it's just, so that's one way. But I also, realize it's like parenting with, I used to be a second grade teacher, and, you can be creative in teaching, and you need to love your students. Like I have 2 kids, and they're not kids, they're young adults now, but you also have to have boundaries around that. So it's not chaos. Like otherwise it's just chaos in your classroom, kids everywhere. It's just like people like leaving, and you can't do that. It's not going to work. There's no learning that happens. There's no growth that happens unless there's boundaries and things. And, just because you're you're a loving parent doesn't mean that you can just let your kids go wayside. Just like just because you're a creative entrepreneur doesn't mean that you're just going to let your organization go wayside and just do whatever you want to do because you think it's creative. It has to be checked into, wait, does this make any sense at all? Like, where would this lead us in 5 years if we make this decision? Does this make, this is in alignment with our goals? So that's where that's how I keep myself in check. I have people who surround me who say no to me. And I also live a life with really strict boundaries. I mean, even my day-to-day has a lot of strict boundaries.
Cool. Like what would be like some strict boundaries that you have on your day-to-day?
Okay, so I have for many years, I have a very strict morning ritual. Like actually my daily checklist is called Fugues, FEWWGGS. And my entire day lives within that boundary of like meditation, exercise. Like I meditate for 30 minutes. I exercise at least 30 minutes, which is always more. I write, I drink water, a certain amount. I eat certain servings of greens. I have 3 gratitudes and I sleep for at least 7 hours. So even though it seems like I'm everywhere, I am very stringent with my day-to-day living. Like I'm very stringent in how I like organize my day. And that's how I also live. Like, so I'm creative, but I'm also very structured.
That's amazing, Odette. Right there, we discovered a system. You're the visionary, you're the creator, you're super creative, but you have a specific system that you abide by to actually be able to execute what you need to execute, right?
Yeah. And it's funny because my husband thinks I'm so, oh my God. He just like people who know me and who are close to me, they just shake their heads like, oh my God, stop. It's just like, I can't get my checks done. I need to get this checked off. You need to zoom over to this juice bar because I haven't eaten well. I need to like check that box. Like I literally live my life for this checkbox of like self-care. It's just, so that's how I have always been that way. And my husband, who we've been together for like 30 years and he knows me. He knows that I'm kind of, very creative and very this and that, but I'm very consistent with certain things.
Wow, absolutely. So would you say that this is like really contributing to your success, having that creativity, the vision, but also having boundaries?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also contributed to my being able to parent my kids, like, and have very successful, kids who are thriving. Because I was the primary caregiver of my children. And, I was also raising them. They didn't go to babysitters. I couldn't afford babysitters or daycare. So I had to navigate mothering and parenting and growing a business. So it's like, I can't have kids like whining. I can't have kids like, in fact, I was with my daughter and she was like, yeah, Mom, like you never allowed us to whine because every time we whine, like, you just teased us until we stopped. I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Like just like there's just certain boundaries around things that I would not tolerate or just say, okay, that's just not going to be workable. Like having you, choose food, what to eat, not to eat when you're, it's just not going to happen. It's not going to work if we just let you go. So I treat myself that way. And yeah, that's how I keep myself in check. And I'm, here I am. Just
amazing. And your kids work with you in the business, right?
Yeah. My daughter is a senior at the University of Arizona. She has one more year before she finishes. She got into the early admission for a graduate degree in management information systems. So she's going to finish that within the next year. My son is a sophomore at the University of Washington in Tacoma, and they do work in the business. My son was just with me at an industry event. He was in EO Alchemy. You met my son.
That's right.
So he attends like entrepreneur organization events. He's done it since he was little, like since he was 12 years old. I've taken him to a whole lot of EO events where he's surrounded by entrepreneurs and I've taken him to, look at businesses, visit other countries, and, we look at business models together. He kind of knows about it. He's very excited to be my partner. I am looking forward to passing down the torch. And I've told my kids that I'm looking forward to being their assistant. I'll sit in the back and I'll write notes and, and, I'll answer to them. I'd be happy to do that just because, I know that I've raised people who are smarter than me, and I'm very excited.
That's amazing, Odette. And I met your son. He's an amazing, amazing person. And so it's so well-mannered and interested and wanted to learn. And it was great meeting him. So you definitely did a fantastic job as a mom.
Yeah. And that took a lot of boundaries, took a lot of love and a lot of boundaries.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think you really proved that, you can be creative. You have to be creative. You have to have imagination. You have to have grit. You have to have persistence. You have to have a vision, but you also have to set systems and boundaries at the same time so you can actually push forward your vision.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. And it's just the same as love, right? Like you can't say you love somebody and then it's a free for all. There has to be boundaries around that because, you can't, I think that's the whole perception and learning that I've, just been living my life by is just that there has to be boundaries around that, both creativity and love. And, it applies to everything really. And that's what systems are. And I do have like pretty incredible systems. I have like massive spreadsheets. Like I go from here and there, for my own life. And it's been very helpful to do that in business because I didn't have that for many, many years. I was just like constantly problem solving and I'm like, I'm tired. It's just so hard to like be reactive. It's just so tiring.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, our listeners that are listening right now or watching this, hopefully they will get inspired by seeing that, you can still maintain your creativity, your imagination, and your vision to move forward. And then you just create the implementation around it and surround yourself with people. Just like you said, surround yourself with people that actually complement you, right? That
Yes.
You can say, I want to do this and I want to do that. And then you have your team that go, okay, well, not on that. Yes, on that. Let me help you execute. Let's do this. Let's do that. And have that support around you, which is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having some people who just literally like question things, like question my thought process and question this and that has been so helpful. I mean, it's bad for the ego, right? Because you think you're like so smart and you have such, you have such vision. But then when people say that's bonkers, no way. It's just like, oh, maybe it is bonkers. And I've, and it has saved us in a lot of ways. Maybe we've also lost some opportunities. I'm sure that we've lost many opportunities, but, I'm not going to look back and say, oh, if we had done that, we could have, or the I told you so. I don't. It's just like, we'll just move forward. There's always something on the other end, it has to be good for everybody.
It is true because you have to make a decision at some point, right? And you made a decision and you have to live with it and just move forward for sure.
Yeah. And that's one of the challenges too of being creative because decision making can be hard. You're just like waffling. If I did this, if I did that, like what could happen? And you have all these creative, like imaginary outcomes. And so you need to just like rail it in and say, okay, what outcome can I, tolerate or be good with? Like what outcome can I be good with? And usually it's the outcome of like, is this going to contribute to the quality of life, to my quality of life, the quality of life of my family, my children, people who work for me in 5 years? Like what kind of life will this choice give us? And I'm not just thinking about me, right? So I have people who work for me. There's a community that I live in. It's like, how good is this? What is the overall impact? And usually the answer is very clear. If it's just not a good choice, it's going to be clear that in 5 years, it's going to be a shit show.
That's very true.
Not, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's whatever the decisions that you make and what's the consequence. I mean, that's part of being a great leader. I mean, looking ahead and seeing the consequences of it.
Hmm. Right.
That's cool. That's very true. So with that, my last question is what's the future look like? Where is the business going in terms of the future?
Oh, we are just dealing with a lot of changes in our industry. We're in the food business where there's a lot of supply chain, challenges. There's a lot of different, iterations of regulations and all that. So currently we're navigating through just the next, what it would look like in 5 years as we grow our business. So just mitigating the impacts on certain challenges that we're looking forward to. I'm very conscientious of the recession that we're entering or we are in already and the challenges in the food supply chain and also transportation, et cetera. So as we plan on growth, that takes up a lot of my time, just kind of navigating through that, talking to people, optimizing efficiencies, making sure my staff is good, and making sure that my family's, thriving. So that is where we're at. We're still growing as a business. We still have a lot of inbound inquiries of expansion. So, but we have to balance that with our capacity to actually fulfill our orders and our POs that they give us. Because in 23 years, the reason why we've been in business and been successful is because we are people of our word. That has been our mantra. When we say we're going to do it, we're going to do it. And we underpromise and overdeliver. And you know what? With all of the unknowns currently in the current market, it's hard to be underpromising and overdelivering, because our vendors are not delivering. They promise and they're not delivering because it's not even their fault sometimes, right? So there's a lot of things going on. So we're just making sure that we're living by our values and see what kind and pivoting and maybe shifting our goals, because right now our goals maybe will be impacted by a lot of unknowns. So that is what I do as a visionary, is just looking forward and walking, few steps ahead. And that takes a lot of time alone. And that takes a lot of time of silence and thought. In a very busy world, it's not easy to come by. So that's where I'm at. And my team is very busy. The season is very, very busy for us. We have a lot of production, and we have a lot of just fun activities going on. But that's where we're at. We're growing and navigating through very rough waters and steadying the ship.
And with you at the helm, that's going to happen.
Thank you, Addie.
Yes, no doubt. No doubt. I mean, you overcame so much getting here. So, it's just a matter of continuing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm grateful that we met at the climbing gym. And
that was great. Then we had this great interview. So if our listeners would like to find out more, so let's repeat the website. So go ahead and give us the 2 websites they can go to.
Sure. It's celebritycakestudio.com and dragonflycakes.com. And that is our e-commerce site for our Dragonfly brand. And you can also find that brand of pedophores and tea cakes online on Harry and David and Whole Foods and other natural markets all over the country. So I wish I could name off all the hundreds of stores, but I can't. But you can.
Well, we're gonna add the website to the show notes, and then definitely, I mean, that's a great opportunity for holiday gifts, for gifts anytime, and check out those cakes, and definitely go to celebritycakestudios.com because those cakes are beautiful. It's just like admiring them. Amazing.
Yeah, and one of the things that have been very well received is we do cake decorating, team building events for companies. So we do like these events for corporate clients like Amazon and Zillow and all that. So we teach what we do. We teach artistic work to different people, and it's quite fun.
So much fun. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really fun. We send the kits out and then we do a virtual event. It's really, really fun.
That is so cool. Amazing. Well, Odette, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. It was a great conversation about being a visionary and using systems and boundaries and how you balance your life and being authentic. Love that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Addie. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.